But in all of them, it's about the leader, but it's also about the movements that they inspire. And I think that's the secret sauce. That's the thing that these movies really kind of sweep the audience up in. Maybe we all can't be an A. Philip Randolph or a Caesar Chavez, but we can certainly be a part of their movement and listen to what they're saying and agree with them and go out when they call us to fight for justice and fight for our fellow workers.
Hello, powerful people, and welcome back to Power at Work. My name is Seth Harris, and I'm a senior fellow at the Burns Center for Social Change, and this is Labor Oscars 2025. These are the movie awards that focus on worker power unions and collective action. I can promise you that this show will be shorter than that other Oscars show. I think it's going to be a lot more fun. And it is certainly going to be much more tightly focused on workers. We have three terrific guests to talk about movies that feature worker power unions and worker collective action. Our guests will offer their opinions about our nominated films in each of the 5 categories. But you, the Power at Work community, have already chosen the winners, and they are here in the Labor Oscars gold box. As you can see, we really upped the production values this year. We have a gold box, and the golden envelopes are in the box, and I will pull them out when the time comes. In this blogcast, we're going to reveal the films that you have chosen to win The Worker, which I am legally obligated to say is a completely fake award that comes with absolutely no compensation of any kind, but it does show our love for our community's favorite films. But before we start our awards show, I'm very proud to tell you that Power at Work is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. The Labor Radio Podcast Network connects over 200 radio shows and podcasts. To learn more about the network and to find other terrific labor radio shows and podcasts, please visit www.laborradionetwork.org. And if you want to listen to or download any or all of the Power at Work blogcasts in podcast form, they are available for streaming and download on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast. Just search Power at Work. We will pop right up. And when we pop up, 2 things that you should do. 1, immediately subscribe. That way you will never miss a Power at Work podcast segment. And number 2, give us a 5-star rating. That way people like you and our guests and me who care about workers and worker power will find our content, and they'll be able to listen to it and enjoy it as well. They will appreciate it, and so will we. We're going to talk about worker power movies, and we'll announce the winners of the Labor Oscars 2025 in this blogcast. Labor Oscars 2025 continues Power at Work's efforts to lift up cultural contributions that focus on workers, worker power, collective action, and unions. This year, we had our first ever Labor Grammys. This is our second Labor Oscars. And let me say, if we can advance the cause of worker power by sitting in front of a screen and enjoying other people's art, well, then count us in. And let me say, it has been a huge amount of fun watching these movies and debating them with people. Now, before I tell you a little bit more about the Labor Oscars, let me introduce our amazingly patient and extremely distinguished expert panel. We are joined by 2 returning guests who were so compelling last year that we absolutely had to have them back. Our friend Harold Phillips is an actor and a voice artist and a podcast host and a SAG-AFTRA member. He is also, very happy to say, one of the coordinators of the Labor Radio Podcast Network that you just heard me talking about. Harold, welcome back to Power at Work.
It is great to be back, Seth, and thank you so much for doing this again this year, though I still have to protest that term, Labor Oscars.
I know, but you're going to see. I remember Norma Rae is a nominated film this year. Harold wants us to call them not The Worker, but the Normas. Now, Norma Rae is a nominated film this year. We'll see how it does, because that may affect the debate. Our second guest, returning guest, is Jennifer Marin, a movie critic and a co-founder of the Alliance of Women Film Journalists. Jennifer, it is so wonderful to have you back on Power at Work for the Labor Oscar Awards ceremony.
Thank you very much. It is an honor and joy to be here. This is a very important way of recognizing the impact that media has on our social political situation.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. And joining our returning guests is a first timer on Power at Work, and we love our first timers, and we won't leave them alone after they've been on. They've shown a willingness to come on. We don't leave them alone. We keep dragging them back. Tammy Gold is a documentary filmmaker, a visual artist, and a professor at Hunter College of the City University of New York, which happens to be my mother's alma mater. She teaches in the Department of Film and Media Studies. Tammy was the director of Out at Work, Lesbians and Gay Men on the Job, a documentary feature that we proudly included on our Labor Oscars 2025 list of worker power films. It is a wonderful documentary. I encourage you to take a look at it. But now I'm going to encourage you to help me welcome Tammy Gold to Power at Work.
Hi. Do you want me to say anything? Okay. My name is Tammy.
You just have to say hi.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tammy, and I'm a passionate filmmaker and an activist and someone who appreciates celebrating working class people in all its possibilities.
Well, can I just say, you're absolutely in the right place. You are in the right place on Power at Work. Okay, let me remind everyone of the Labor Oscars process very, very quickly. So on January 26th, we published a list of 68 worker power movies broken into 4 categories: Best Feature Film, Best Documentary Film, Best International Labor Film, and Best Worker Power Profile, Individual or Small Group. We asked a very distinguished group of trade unionists, former Power at Work student co-ops, film scholars, film critics, leaders of labor film festivals, actors, and filmmakers to serve on a nominating committee. And the nominating committee chose films in each of the 4 categories I just listed, plus a 5th category, worst labor films, which I have to admit is my absolutely favorite category and the one that draws the most heat every year. Then on February 10th, we opened the voting to Power at Work subscribers. We gave them a week. The votes poured in. And then during this blogcast, we are going to reveal the movies you chose to be the winners of the vaunted worker. So, expert panel, are we ready to get started with the Labor Oscars Awards Ceremony 2025?
Let's go.
Yep.
Here we go. So we're ready to reveal the winners in 4 categories. The winners, I read that wrong. That was a bad line reading, Harold. We are ready to reveal the winners in 4 categories of labor films and the loser in the 5th category, which is worst labor film. But we also want this incredibly distinguished panel of expert guests to opine on the movies and to talk a little bit about film. So we'll talk about the awards, we'll talk about the movies, we'll talk a little bit about film and workers. And so I'll have those questions as we go along. But let's start from the bottom, which means our first category is worst labor movie. The nominees are, beginning with 2 returning nominees from last year, Hoffa from 1992, directed by the great comedic actor Danny DeVito. It won The Worker last year for worst labor film, and so its reward was to be on the list again this year, the list of nominees. The Pajama Game from 1957, directed by George Abbott and Stanley Donen. And then this year's new nominees in the worst labor film category. And let me say, I was shocked by a couple of these. In Dubious Battle from 2016, directed by James Franco, the actor James Franco. On the Waterfront from 1954, directed by Elia Kazan, which, let me just say, was on our list of best feature films last year. So, oh, how the mighty have fallen in 2025. And then the final film nominated for worst labor film is The Irishman from 2019, directed by Martin Scorsese. So, Harold, I'm going to start with you on this because my recollection is that last year you were pretty upset that The Pajama Game was included on the list. And here it is again on this year's list. So I'm not saying that this vindicates last year's list in any way. And let me hasten to add that the labor movie I hate most, which I voted for last year, Fist, was not nominated this year. So that shows that, this list is kind of all over the place. So, Harold, are you as shocked as I am by some of the movies that are on this list? And also tell us, what's your pick for worst labor movie?
Seth, I'm not really, because there are some truly terrible movies on this list, and there are some really well-made movies that don't actually paint labor in all that good a light. And I'm thinking particularly of On the Waterfront. I mean, no one can say that is a badly made film. It's a wonderfully made film, but I don't think working people and labor are really shown in the best light in that film. I was surprised to see In Dubious Battle on this list, because the content is certainly very pro worker power and pro labor. It's just a really dreadfully made film. I don't know what happened in the editing process, but there are some bad edits that happen there and some pacing issues and that sort of thing. I do have to disagree with you slightly. I was not outraged that The Pajama Game was on the worst list last year. In fact, that is my vote for this year because I hate The Pajama Game.
Oh,
Fire of 1,000 White Hot Suns. That movie is just enraging. Not just because Doris Day, the union steward, falls in love with management, but for the end, which I hesitate to spoil a 60-year-old movie at this point, but the workers give a party for the boss? Are you freaking kidding me? That's The Pajama Game, I can't go within 5 blocks of a showing of that without my blood pressure spiking.
wow. So I remembered that completely wrong. I thought that you were pretty unhappy about that, but it turns out that, boy, with the power of 1,000 suns, that's real hatred. That's really something. All right.
What you're remembering is I was a little upset that Fist was on the list because that is a masterpiece. And
that was our disagreement, is that I hated Fist and you liked it more than I got it. Okay. So Jennifer, I want to pick up on a point that Harold is making, and I want to make it a little more explicit and get you to comment on it. So The Irishman and Hoffa, of course, are both about the late Teamsters president, Jimmy Hoffa, and corruption in that union. And On the Waterfront, of course, is also famously about union corruption, but in a different union. Do you think the nominating committee was sending a message that they just don't like films that lift up ugly stories about corrupt figures in the labor movement, and what they want is to be ennobled and empowered by labor stories instead?
Yes, I would say that that's true. And I would say that they're right. I think that the films that create sort of a cult of criminality and corruption are very, they're not good additions to our roster of films that have to do with labor. Labor films should show the positive action of labor. For my film, on one comment that I would make on this list has to do with On the Waterfront, and I would vote for that film solely because it was made by Elia Kazan, who was a squealer during the McCarthy era. He named names at the House Un-American Activities Committee, and I personally, my family, my mother's peers were impacted by that. I lived through that, and it seems to have disappeared from people's memories who now celebrate Kazan. I think that there is, in criticizing a film or in looking at the effect of it or impact of a film, you also have to consider the ethics of the way in which of the filmmaker, and his are not acceptable to me. So I would say that automatically places On the Waterfront at my worst list. The others are, you can explain why they're on there, but this film goes a step further for me.
That's fascinating. I wondered about whether or not Elia Kazan's politics and his behavior during the McCarthy era played into the nominating committee's voting as well. One of the shames of that is that it features one of the truly great performances in the English language by Marlon Brando, his breakout performance. And it was, but I understand what you're saying about the politics of Elia Kazan as a director. So, Tammy, you are a director. There are some historically great directors, or at least one historically great director on this list. What do you think makes for a bad film? And particularly, what makes for a bad labor film? And tell us also what your pick is in this category.
I guess I have a lot of questions about who the filmmaker is. Is it anti-labor, anti-organized labor, and also the general making of the film? And then why does a film stand up to decades and celebrated? So I think there's many different levels. In terms of who made the film, I agree with Jennifer. I don't agree with the fact that to love a film, you have to love the filmmaker. But in this particular case, that On the Waterfront has so many contradictions in the narrative. The making of the film is stunning, but the very narrative is really, once again, kind of like presenting labor as a dark cloud, always like presenting labor and workers who are organized or organizing as kind of skeezy, corrupt, and yeah, it reproduces the notion of what labor is, specifically what organizing is. It really puts that in such a negative light. To me, that's very significant. So to me, the narrative really stands out.
Seth, can I just suggest
Wait,
that
I want to get Tammy's vote. So what movie are you going to put as your worst on this list, Tammy?
Well, the list is endless. We know that. We know that Hollywood has a history of presenting workers and unions and the whole aspect of organizing in terrible light. I think On the Waterfront, because in this particular case, having known who the director is and the impact on the film industry, and I can't separate that. I really can't.
Okay, Harold, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I was just going to suggest that in this category alone, you rename the award that's being given the Skeezy, because that seems to be quite appropriate.
I like that. I like that very much. Okay, our expert panel has spoken, but our community has spoken even more loudly. Here in the golden envelope, I have the answer. And the worker for worst labor film goes to... By the way, accountants had nothing whatsoever to do with this. I just want you to know that. There had no accountants involved in this process at all. The worst labor film goes to The Irishman from 2019, directed by Martin Scorsese. It was pretty close. It was pretty close. Number 2 was The Pajama Game. Number 3 was On the Waterfront. Hoffa came in number 4, and Indubious Battle was way behind, which is consistent with the theme that we were just talking about. All the movies that talked about corruption or were what Harold described about The Pajama Game did very poorly and ended up as the worst labor film. But the worst labor film was The Irishman by one of the truly great American directors, Martin Scorsese. That was a That's a little bit of a surprise to me. I didn't think that was how it was going to come out. Okay, our next category. Oh, Tammy, go ahead. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just jump in.
Okay. Why do you think The Irishman? Can we just talk a little and deconstruct that? Why the worst?
Well, what's your reaction to it?
I guess let me just start by saying, Harold, what's your reaction? I'm going to toss the ball over there.
I think we could give The Irishman an award called the Snoozy, because not only does it not paint labor writ large or Jimmy Hoffa in the best light, but it's long. I don't think I've ever finished that movie, and I've tried to watch it like 5 times, and it's put me to sleep every time.
Interesting. I think it's entirely possible that this was recency bias, because remember that On the Waterfront is 70 years old now, something. I think it was 1954, and The Irishman is 5 years old, and everybody now, or who's around now, who goes to films, knows who Martin Scorsese is. It starred Robert De Niro, who's still acting and one of the great American actors. So I just think it's more salient to people. But again, it features a corrupt union, a corrupt leader, and the murder of that corrupt leader. And I think it's very hard to see it as a positive labor message in any way. What's your take on it, Tammy? Do you want to comment on it?
It was boring. I guess the thing is, I couldn't, it's very hard to follow a narrative when it doesn't have kind of the threads that hold the story together. So to me, that's a problem. And that's not a problem because it was anti-labor.
That's very interesting. I finished it. I wouldn't say that I loved it, but I definitely did finish it. Okay, let's go on to category number. Oh, I'm sorry, Jennifer, please.
Yeah, I don't really consider this to be a labor film. I consider it to be kind of a bio thriller pick of some sort that features good old boys, primarily, and the other thing that's important, I think, to me about this and why it is not a labor film is that I didn't learn anything from this film. And I would prefer to learn something about collectivity, about human behavior, about human need in any film that could be labeled labor.
Yeah.
Labeled labor.
I have
Fascinating.
to say, I did learn something, and that's that digital de-aging is very creepy. No.
Inside baseball. Okay. Our next category is best worker power profile, small group or individual. And basically, this is the biopic category that Jennifer was just referencing. 4 of the movies were nominated for the second year in a row. They are Cesar Chavez, An American Hero from 2014, directed by Diego Luna. Rustin from 2023, directed by George C. Wolfe, the great public theater auteur from New York City. 10,000 Black Men Named George from 2003, directed by Robert Townsend. And Union Maids from 1976, directed by Julia Reichert and Jim Klein. Those 4, I should have mentioned, there were a lot of ties in the voting by the nominating committee. So this category has 6 movies in it, not the 5 that we had thought. We didn't want to leave anybody out when the nominating committee gave them all the same number of votes. So those 4 returning movies, Chavez, Rustin, 10,000 Black Men Named George, and Union Maids. And then the 2 new entrants, or the 1 new entrant in this category, so I guess it is 5, was Made in Dagenham from 2010, directed by Nigel Coates, which was nominated in the Best International Labor Film category last year and is nominated in that category again this year. It's the only film to be nominated in more than 1 category, which I thought was interesting. All right, Tammy, let's talk about biopics. Do you think the makers we lost Tammy. I don't know why that happened. Maybe have an internet problem. Okay, let's go on to you, Jennifer. How much do you think the power of a biopic depends on how appealing the individual or group being featured is to the audience. Does the director essentially have to sell the audience on the character, or is there more to it than that?
I think there should be more to it than that. Unfortunately, I think sometimes audiences are rather superficial in their criteria. I think it's, depends not only on how the individual, the character is sculpted into the scenario, but also on who's playing the character. So that you will always find a Meryl Streep who's playing a Silkwood to be a very appealing and well liked, well accepted, well received, critically acclaimed. I mean, worthwhile, of course, more than a character that is played by a lesser known talent or less popular talent. In this category, I have a little bit of a bias to Union Maids because Union Maids is full of union songs, and those were songs that I sang before I knew how to talk. My mother was one of the founders of AFTRA and was a union
Wow.
organizer, and I was, oh, you can't scare me, I'm singing to the union all the way as a child. So I have a bias towards Union Maids, but I would say, and I also have a very strong feeling about Maiden Dagenham. But I would say that my pick here would be Cesar Chavez, because Cesar Chavez embodies a movement, and this is a very well made film that shows the effectiveness of collective action as led by an individual, but he does not stand out as the sole, for lack of a better word, perpetrator. He's not the one who accomplishes the deal. The deal is done by the collective that is led by him. So and it's a wonderful film. I voted for that one.
Yeah, I think it was an underappreciated film. Cesar Chavez was an underappreciated film, an underseen film. I thought it was. I agree with you. It was absolutely beautiful. I'm not casting votes this year, but I want to agree. Hold up your statements on Cesar Chavez. Tammy, glad we got you back. Let me ask you this
Yes.
question. In addition to getting your pick in this category, do you think the makers of feature biopics have greater freedom with the story that they're telling than documentarians do? And does that necessarily mean that biopics are always going to be at least a little bit fictionalized?
Well, I don't think a biopic has to be fictionalized. And if that's going to be what we understand as a biopic that's a narrative, then we have a real problem, because we don't want our heroes to be fabricated, and we don't want them all. I mean, we have to be really careful with how we understand a biopic. I love that film, and very much I loved it because I could feel it emotionally. I love the film because of collective action. I love the film because I love the leader of the movement, but he is not, he's of the movement, he is not the leader. So there were a lot of reasons why I had felt strongly about the film. I also love celebrating heroes,
Mm.
real live heroes that have gone uncelebrated. And it's like, isn't that what we mean when we say a Labor Academy Awards? It's to honor organizers, whether they're completely internationally visible or whether they're organizers on a kind of smaller scale. I don't know where Chavez is in terms of the international landscape of understanding labor, but I do know, what did it mean to us to boycott grapes? I mean, some of us raised our children where they would plead to have a grape. I mean, it's kind of, to me, it resonates, something that even in the smallest sense of the word, I experienced. So, and the question is, again, if we say that a narrative film can go beyond the truth, and have fictionalized elements, they better really let people know, and not just know some of these scenes are fictionalized, what scenes. That's
Hmm.
my opinion.
Interesting. That's a good opinion. Harold, I want to ask you if there's a larger message about worker power that we can draw from these biopics. Even something as straightforward, I guess I'm sort of repeating what Tammy said here, even something as straightforward as inspiration. Or perhaps that these people are admirable and we should aspire to being more like them. What do we take away from these worker power biopics?
Well, absolutely. The subject of the movie is admirable, and I'm sure the directors want the audience to find them admirable and perhaps emulate them, such as Norman Jewison did in that great masterpiece, Fisk, which we're not going to talk about, apparently. Uh, but I think more than that, I think in all of these, even though the main character is the labor leader for the most part, even in Union Maids, it's the leaders. They're surrounded by people who are helping them. Perhaps most pronouncedly in Cesar Chavez, but in all of them, it's about the leader, but it's also about the movements that they inspire. And I think that's the secret sauce. That's the thing that these movies really kind of sweep the audience up in. Maybe we all can't be an A. Philip Randolph or a Cesar Chavez, but we can certainly be a part of their movement and listen to what they're saying and agree with them and go out when they call us to fight for justice and fight for our fellow workers. I love Cesar Chavez, the film. I do have to say, I myself, I voted for 10,000 Men Named George, simply because I don't think enough people know about A. Philip Randolph and about the Pullman strike. And again, Andre Braugher was fantastic as Randolph in that film, but equally fantastic were all of the people who Randolph surrounded himself with in order to pull off this strike. So, as an indication of how it takes multiple people for a movement, I really think that Robert Townsend did a great job with that film.
I think he did. And Robert Townsend, not necessarily known as a biopic director, right? Sort of more thought of as sort of more light fare, right? He started as a I think he started as a stand-up comedian, or at least as a comedic actor. And this is sort of, to me, this was an unexpected movie from him. So
Can I
our
just add
expert,
one thing?
please
Also,
do.
with many of these biopics that are fictionalized versions of labor leaders' lives, there are also documentaries, and I think it's advisable for audiences to watch both the narrative and the documentary, and weigh out and feel the difference, and be inspired by the information that they receive from both the documentary and the narrative feature.
Right. I think that's an important point, consistent with what Tammy was just saying. Okay, our subscribers have spoken. We have the golden envelope that's going to give us the answer to The Worker Goes To for best worker power biopic.
Okay.
10,000 Black Men Named George. Now, what was notable about that's directed by Robert Townsend, as we just said. Here's what's very notable about this category. I'm looking at my my notes here. 10,000 Black Men Named George got 25% of the vote. Union Maids got 22% of the vote. Cesar Chavez got 22% of the vote. Rustin got 22% of the vote. So we had a winner and a three-way tie for second. Maiden Dagenham got only 9% of the vote. A close result showing that folks just really loved all of these movies. Really interesting outcome. Our nominating committee split in multiple ways on the results here.
You squeaked it out, Robert. Squeaked it out.
I wanted to say something about Rustin. There is the documentary, and there's the documentary and then the narrative film, which is more recent. Has there been another narrative film that you can think of that's a labor film that factors in gay politics?
A narrative film.
Well, Pride. I mean, Pride is definitely all about the gay movement in the 80s in England and how they supported the miners' strike and how the
Oh,
miners
that's
then
yeah.
supported them.
I think there may be a film about Stonewall as well. I know that there's a documentary, but I'm fairly sure that there's been a narrative
But does that
film as well.
but
Sorry?
is that like a film that is really centering a leader and centering a leader that most people really only saw in the kind of like as a icon, not really the nitty gritty?
If we're
Does
talking
that
about
make
the
sense?
Stonewall film, not so much. That was sort of a fictionalized character that it put it around as opposed to Marsha Johnson or some of the other great
Yeah.
leaders. Pride, I will say, I don't remember the guy's name, but the leader of the group of gay people was a major movement figure who unfortunately died of AIDS soon after the events of the film. And I think a lot of people learned about him and about the work that he did in the 80s through that movie.
Mhm.
Lance
This
David
is-
Black
Oh.
comes to mind. I mean, has he directed? Does anybody know whether he's directed such a film?
I don't know.
Hey, I'm Carlos Sotomayor. I'm the president of Unite Here Local 26, and I'm here to let everyone know that you should go and you should subscribe now to Power at Work.
State Representative Christopher Worrell. Make sure you subscribe to Power at Work.
Hi, I'm John Merrick. I'm 83 years old, retired from the Fairmont Copley Plaza for 7 years, where I was a bartender and a server. And I want to recommend and support Power at Work. And I suggest that people, especially working people, subscribe to its mission.
This is Labor Oscars 2025, and we are talking with Tammy Gold, Harold Phillips, and Jennifer Merrin about worker power movies. We've made it through 2 of our categories, Worst Labor Film, and we just talked about Best Worker Power Profile Film, Individual or Small Group. So we are up to category number 3, and this is Best International Labor Movie. And by that, we simply mean a movie that was produced outside the United States. The nominating committee spread its votes so widely that we ended up with a number of movies that were tied in the final vote. And as I said before, we didn't want to leave anybody out. And so we included all of them. So in this category, I think we have 7 films. The 4 returning nominees are Germinal from 1993, directed by Claude Berry from France, Maiden Dagenham, 2010, directed by Nigel Coates from Great Britain. The Factory, 2015 film directed by Raoul Roy of India, our friend Raoul Roy. The Organizer from 1963, directed by Mario Monicelli from Italy. And then this year's new nominees in the Best International Labor Film category are Blood Fruit, 2014, directed by Sinead O'Brien from Ireland. Still the Enemy Within, in 2014, directed by Owen Gower of Great Britain. So we don't have these rules that the Academy has, where you can only have one from each country. We think great art is great art wherever it comes from. And then finally, The Take from 2004, directed by husband and wife team Naomi Klein and Avi Lewis from Canada. So Jennifer, let me start with you in this category. And of course, we want to know your pick in this category. But I noticed that this is a quite diverse group of films, not just diverse with respect to the nation of origin. We have some features, we have some documentaries, we have some biopics, we have some narrative stories. Is there something universal in that list of films that do you think put them on our nominating committee's list of favorites?
I do not see that kind of a thread here. I just think it's a widely divergent list. I think one of the things that would make someone choose a title here is that it reaches beyond its own nationality or its own ethnicity and can be seen as applicable and inspirational for the world at large. It's difficult. I mean, what you've asked is a very difficult question for me. For me, the one that I voted for and the one that I really feel strongly about is Blood Fruit, which is new. And again, I didn't know about it, and it shows really that collective worker action power is effective, is really something that we need to learn how to harness. And that is a very clear example of how that power harness has a positive impact. But as to a common thread, I don't know. Maybe one of the other panelists has an answer to that. I don't.
I don't think it's obvious. The only thought that I had in that regard is, even though these are, I don't like this phrase, but foreign films, meaning films that are not about Americans, made by Americans in the United States, every story that's told in these films is absolutely relatable for American workers and for Americans who care about workers. Like, so you watch a film like Germinal, which is about a French coal mine strike from, I believe, the 19th century. And it absolutely resonated with actually some of the other films like Harlan County, USA and Matewan that are about American coal mine strikes. Now, it's not just because they happen to be in the same occupation, in the same industry, but because the struggle is very, very much the same. The factory also has echoes in some of what we're seeing in some of the warehouse fights and factory fights that we're seeing today. So that was the only thought that I have, is that there's a relatability, even though they are films about another country and maybe another time, and maybe even a group of workers that we wouldn't see in the United States. That was my only reaction to it. Do you have a thought about that, Jennifer?
I think you're right. I think we are looking for ways, we who support labor, we who are of labor, and we who believe in collectivity and collective bargaining are looking for ways to universalize that and to connect. We're no longer isolated as a nation. We're no longer isolated as workers, as American auto workers. We are workers, and this list does give us an opportunity to pull together and understand that. And I think you're right. I think your assessment is the right one.
Right. I would just say this. I'll add one more point about this, and that is that I was having a discussion with some trade unionists actually this week, and making the point that the only way to build solidarity is for workers to see themselves in the lives of other workers whose lives may look superficially very, very different, but to see that their cause is a common cause and that their concerns and their issues and their interests are common interests. And that's one of the values of these kinds of films, is I think it communicates that message very effectively. Harold, let me turn to you. I'm going to contradict myself a little bit now. Goodness gracious, there's a lot of English language films on this list, right? They're not American films, but you have Canada, you have Ireland, you have two great films from Great Britain. Are we missing out on great labor films because there's something of a resistance to reading subtitles?
Yes. I mean, that's an easy one. Unfortunately, there is a resistance not only to reading subtitles, but there's a certain resistance to cultural differences, I think, that sometimes come through in foreign language films. The whole idea of countries being separated by a common language, as Shaw said, is on full display when Americans watch a British film or a Canadian film or even an Australian film, though, the cultural differences are maybe a little broader there. But when you're talking about The Organizer, for instance, which is a fantastic film, it's in black and white, it's Italian, it's got that Italian style, and you have to read the subtitles to know what's going on. I think there are a lot of people who aren't willing to make that connection. Or Germinal, which was my pick in this category. Amazing film, as you pointed out, so reminiscent of Mate One. It is about class struggle. It is about the same stuff that people in the United States are fighting against, and it's a beautiful film. But the historical setting and the frankly beautiful cinematography, but still sort of grim, darkly lit cinematography, it can dissuade some people who might look at that and say, oh, foreign art film. So yeah, it's sad that there is that disinclination, because there's a lot of great labor films out there. Germinal was taken from an Emile Zola novel, and even that can dissuade people. It sounds like something that your 7th grade English teacher is going to make you read. And not nearly as accessible as Joe Esterhaus's script for the classic film Fist. But we're not talking about that stuff.
Wow. You're like a dog with a bone, but that bone came from a fist. It's really something. All right, let me get away from Fist and get to Tammy as quickly as I possibly can. So Tammy, I'm going to express an opinion that I'm quite confident you're going to agree with, and then I want you to take it wherever you'd like to take it. And that is, I think it's always really perilous to put pieces of art in competition with one another, because every piece of art, every piece of well-made art is unique. I think it's fair to ask whether we should ever be judging pieces of art against one another. Having said that, though, I am eager to get your thoughts on these international labor films and whether you had a favorite in this category.
I have favorites. This category, I didn't feel the synergy in it from one from the other. But do I think comparing good art with other good art, I think that's a real problem. And that's kind of how we look at professions. Some professions have more value and appreciation and status than other professions. And so when we're looking at a film, do we look at the budget? Do we look at many other factors that go into the cinematography, that go into the actual texture of the film? And who are the main actors? Who can afford that? So I think that having categories, I sometimes don't like the categories as we're talking about them, biopic, etc. I also sometimes like the categories of independent filmmaker, what the budget is, what this, somehow to get away from the fight, the comparison, without knowing that context. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't on the list, they don't wear black ties?
Not on the nominees, not on the list of nominees. I believe that it was, I know for sure that it was on the list of movies that we originally put out to our subscribers. No question about it, that we posted.
Oh, it didn't make it,
But
yeah.
it was not nominated by the nominating committee.
To me,
Would that have been your favorite on this list?
like for me, that was I didn't get the feeling that the subtitles or the kind of visual look of it, to me, it was really, kind of, why I say this, I can't even justify, but it felt very much like a revolutionary film, not to compare it with other films, but what it exposed, and really class divisions, and the fact that we see developing nations sometimes as monolithic, rather than as more complicated. So that was some of my takeaway. One of the other reactions I'm having in the discussion is this kind of sense of workers and what workers want to see and see themselves. We're not talking about how dismal the identity within the working classes in the United States. So do they even know that they're seeing themselves? Does that make sense what I'm saying? That we're so divorced from even the understanding that there's organized labor and there's non-union labor. I mean, do people watch films and see that they're not unionized and that even makes a difference to them? I don't know. I don't want us to sit here and romanticize who workers are in 2025.
I think that's a very important and powerful point. A very, very interesting point. And that's an interesting question whether or not when workers watch these movies, to the extent that working class people do watch these movies, because they're very, very hard to access. They're not at the multiplex, right? You're not going to see this in one of those 10 screen movie theaters because they're perceived to be, because they're foreign, they're perceived to be art films. None of these were big box office films, the international films at least.
Can I intervene here?
Please.
I think it's very important for us, for me as a critic, for anyone who is speaking publicly about film, to discuss the commitment to cinema appreciation and to understanding what the impact of cinema is in our society. And I think that we need to make sure that audiences know where to find these films and know what the social and artistic value is of these particular films. It's difficult, perhaps, to find them, but I think with some commitment and some conviction, audiences can find them. They are streaming, they are online. And as for the language issue, hey, America, wake up. English is not, the only language in the world. And on streaming platforms, these films have accessibility to closed caption. All of them do. And it's very easy for you to click on that button and see what's being said. And I think it's an obligation that people need to have to appreciate these films and to understand how strongly they can influence us as individuals and also our society.
Okay, I'm going to break in just because I want to get us through here without taking too much of everybody's time. But for those who would like to watch the nominated films, if you go to Power at Work and go to our most recent Labor Oscars post, you will find a link to a letterboxed link, that a letterboxed collection of a list of all these films, which tells you where you can find all of these films streaming and available. Now, they're not all free. Let me just say 10,000 Black Men Named George happens to be free. It's available on YouTube, but not all of them are free. But you can find access, and that's one of the services that we wanted to provide. And thousands of people, let me just say, are accessing that post that we published with that information. And that's why we did it. But now, there's the envelope with our subscribers' vote for Best International Labor Film. And the worker goes to The Take by Naomi Klein and Avi Lewis, directors. Naomi Klein and Avi Lewis, they're also the narrators. Naomi Klein also wrote the film. This also was very close. I believe The Take got 24%. I'm sorry, The Take got 22%. The Organizer got 19%. Germinal got 16%. The Factory got 16%. Maiden Dagenham got 13%. I mean, they're all in the teens. Blood Fruit, unfortunately, didn't do quite as well. That is really, really something. It was a very, very, very evenly divided vote. But The Take takes home the worker for Best International Labor Film. Let's go on to a favorite category, and that is Best Documentary. It's our next and penultimate category. That means it's the second to last for those of you who are counting at home. This was another category where there was a tie in the nominating committee. So we have 6 films in this category. The returning nominees are At the River I Stand from 1993, directed by David Appleby, Allison Graham, and Stephen Ross. Harlan County, USA from 1976, directed by the great documentarian Barbara Koppel. 9 to 5, The Story of a Movement from 2020, not the feature film with Lily Tomlin and the great Jane Fonda and Dolly Parton that had the song. This is about the Union 9 to 5. That's from 2020, directed by Julia Reichert and Steve Boneyar. And The Wobblies from 1979, directed by Stuart Bird and Deborah Schaffer. Those are the returning nominees. The new nominees in 2025 are Blood on the Mountain from 2016, directed by Jordan Freeman and Mary Lynn Evans, and Union from 2024, directed by Stephen Mang and Brett Story. Of course, this is the documentary about the Amazon labor unions organizing in Staten Island, New York, that could not get a distribution deal from a studio. It's being distributed in small groups. There were labor groups hosting events. It's being distributed. It's available on their website, Union. The film has a website. So go and watch the Union, the film, even if you didn't vote for it in this category. It's well worth seeing. All right, Tammy, now I'm going to ask you the question that goes right to the very core of your very professional existence. What makes for a great documentary? Tell us what makes for a great documentary, and what's your favorite documentary on this list?
What makes for a favorite documentary is for us to take the viewers into a place that they otherwise would not go into. So if it's the Wobblies, it's for me to go into that place, that history, for me to go into something that I didn't know to the extent of the film. And those are historic films, and I think historic films are very different. There's so much I could say about documentaries. One is that they're very long, and that's not where we came from. Back in the day, we thought documentaries, with a few exceptions like Harlan County, but we saw documentaries as a tool of organizing, and that it would be a way to bring people into the nitty gritty of otherwise they wouldn't go into, like out at work. What is it like to work in a factory like Chrysler and have your life threatened because you're gay? I mean, how many people even think about LGBTQ and class? I mean, it's shocking that today there's only one film that is completely worker only in the film that deals with LG, well, lesbian and gay, and that's Out at Work. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing that we don't see documentaries embrace the question of labor rights, and LGBTQ. And so to me, that's a real problem. Issues can be exciting. An issue documentary does not have to be boring. A short documentary does not have to be boring. So one big thing for me is about the length of a documentary, about its intention, and about what the hell am I learning that I didn't know. And I'm going to give a case in point. The film I just finished is called Sex Work, It's Just a Job. It's completely a working class film. It's a class film. It's about sex workers in the sex trade. And many are queer. 50%, maybe 40% are trans. And to articulate labor, working class, LGBTQ is something that's been very hard to do. It's very hard to weave that. I'm not saying the film Sex Work is about that. Sex work is about work, and it's about understanding labor and sex work as a job. So, hey, I think that's a labor film completely and totally. It's about class and it's about labor, about working. It interfaces some trans issues, but there is very few documentaries that are working class, focusing on class, articulating, organizing, and that's specifically about gays and lesbians on the job. So that's how, I mean, I'm going on and on and on.
No,
But
no. You're
so,
educating.
yeah.
You're educating us about documentary. It's very valuable. And let me just say, audience, look for sex. When is Sex Work going to be released, Tammy?
It's done. All that, forget about studios or PBS. Right now, sex work is not considered comfortable for public television. And we know why, because public television, PBS, is under the threat of being defunded because it's so-called public. So just like public radio. So, public health, public education, public broadcasting is in the same category. So I was actually in discussion with a lawyer from POV, the Point of View series on PBS, and they said, take all the money you want for a conflict of interest, because with PBS, you can't have a conflict of interest. Because right now, this was before the election, we can't do anything on that level of creating division, because right away that puts things in very tenuous waters. I'm going to say something that's really fun.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, and then I want to go on to the further discussion.
Okay, how discriminated are unions within documentary? To take money for funding from a union can disqualify you to be on PBS. To take money from corporations, to take money from union busters or from Marble or whatever, Philip Morris, what is their new name? That's okay. But for us to take money from the UAW, made PBS not accept Out at Work.
That's fascinating. I did not know that. That's very, very interesting.
Out at Work was supposed to be taken by PBS. We got secret notices that they were dropping it specifically because of the money we took from the United Auto Workers.
Incredible. Amazing story. So Jennifer, let me turn to you. I'm going to ask you the same question. What makes for a great documentary, and what was your favorite documentary on this list?
I think one of the major issues and the major criteria for great in documentary is transparency. There can't be any hidden agenda. There can't be any hidden stuff that we don't know or that's not revealed to us as an audience. Relationships, for example, that prove to be not so innocent, perhaps. There was a documentary about, I can't remember the name of the documentary, sorry, and I can't remember the name of the director, but it was a documentary about a financial mogul who had been indicted and convicted of major, heavy trading fraud, and was awaiting sentencing for the rest of his life, basically, in jail. And there was a documentary that was made about him in his Park Avenue apartment, which was now, the walls were denuded of all the fine art and all of his stuff was taken away. And he was left with his dog, whom he was going to miss as soon as he got sentenced and was taken away to jail. And it was a very poignant film, in a way. It was made by a man who never disclosed that he had been the assistant of this particular mogul. And I mean, that you need to know that if you're evaluating the documentary, if you're understanding the documentary. I agree, a documentary has to take you into a place where you've not been and allow you to experience it fully. It has to be done in a way that engages you intellectually and emotionally and empowers you with a sense that you can contribute to making a difference by having absorbed that particular documentary and the information. So I think that's what does it for me. These are all really. And by the way, did I mix up 9 to 5, the story of a movement, with Union Maids? Because I'm thinking now that the story of a movement is where I heard all those Union songs, and I apologize for mixing that up. But for me, it has been one of my favorite documentaries for a long time, and continues to be one of my favorite documentaries. And I think that I knew people who worked on the documentary. I, was there when it was made, basically. And that is Barbara Koppel's Harlan County, USA. For me, will always remain one of the great documentary films that opened American interest to documentary, American audience accessibility to documentary, and I will continue to hold that as one of the best.
And it's forever burned in my memory. I saw it as a teenager, and it was absolutely a formative event for me. Harold, I want to ask you this. You're a savvy social media user. We live in an era where documentary of a sort is seemingly everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, they're very, very short documentaries, extremely short documentaries, and there's not necessarily any kind of narrative involved. But we also see organizations like our friends at More Perfect Union that are telling, getting frontline workers to tell their stories, telling stories about bank fraud and about destruction of government agencies. And there is a lot of that kind of stuff. It's not a documentary film. It's certainly not a feature film. It's not even really a documentary short. How does that affect the way that we see documentary, and has maybe taken away a little of the potency of some of the documentaries on this list?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Seth. I do think that the audience is changing for documentaries, but I think the success of Union, even though it hasn't found wide distribution, is an indication that there is still a hunger for long-form documentary. What we see on our phones are made to fit our quick attention span that arguably maybe these things have helped to foster. But you use the right word in your question, and that's narrative. A documentary has to tell a story, just like the biopics that we were talking about before also have to tell a story. The difference between the two is the biopics have some great screenwriter, and I'm not going to mention Joe Esterhaus again. I think I could probably do this thing to this point. They have a screenwriter who is creating a story based around these events, based around these characters. And yeah, they may use some fictionalized elements to make a story that is largely based on real events, but they take their liberties. You can't do that with a documentary. A documentary is capturing things as it happens, or they're capturing the recollections of people who've been through things. And I think there's a real hunger right now for that reality, because we are awash in unreality. And part of that is what we're seeing on our phones. Part of that is what's being pushed forward in social media and, dare I say, some mass media as well. So yeah, documentary is still a strong force and people still want to engage with it. When it comes to my pick in this category, I have to go with Jennifer. To this day, Harlan County, USA lights me up. I watch it every 4 or 5 years because, as Tammy said, I think you said this, Tammy, it really opens a door. It really lets you see people where they live as they're experiencing things. And it's kind of the prototypical documentary in a lot of ways in my mind. I do just want to say briefly, I know we're running over time here, Seth. Tammy, I didn't recognize your name when I first saw you on the list, but I'll tell you, a lot more people think about LGBTQ people in the workplace because of Out at Work. So that was another documentary that opened a door and got people to think about things.
Very good. See, Tammy, you get praise, and all I get is shots at my least favorite labor film. That's the difference. All right. So now I've already opened the envelope. So I'm now going to tell us who the best documentary according to our subscribers is. The Worker Goes To, I should say, Harlan County, USA, from 1976, directed by the great Barbara Koppel. It was not close, let me just say. Harlan County, USA was the only film in the labor Oscars that won a majority vote. It got 53% of the vote. At the River I Stand came in second with 19%. Union came in third with 13%. All the others were in single digits. So talk about an enduring piece of art. No question about it. Harlan County. Okay, we have arrived. We have arrived at our final award, the big one, Best Feature Film. The returning nominees are Matewan from 1987, directed by John Sayles. Norma Rae from 1979, directed by Martin Ritt. And the new nominees this year are Salt of the Earth from 1954, directed by Herbert Biberman. Just a comment on this. This is a gritty black and white film, largely featuring ordinary people playing some of the leading roles, and I think all of the supporting roles. There are some professional actors in lead roles. This movie was financed by a union. That union no longer exists. Maybe it's been absorbed into another union. So Salt of the Earth, a surprising pick, but a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful movie that I heartily recommend. Next on the list of new nominees is Sorry to Bother You, 2018, directed by Boots Riley. I love this film. Boots Riley also stars in this film. I loved this movie. It's a social justice science fiction film about worker power. In part, it's about a lot of other things as well. Jennifer, we lost your picture. Your camera
I know.
is off.
I'm actually on low battery and I'm trying to reconnect. I'm going to have to move the phone. So
okay, very good. That's okay.
Try and keep it steady so that I'm here.
I'm going to stall. I'm going to stall while you do that. And the final new nominee in 2025 is Silkwood from 1983, directed by the great Mike Nichols and starring Meryl Streep, as Jennifer said before, and Cher, among many, many others. Just a fantastic, wonderful film. So we have built the suspense. Our viewers are on the edge of their seats. They've got their phones pressed to their faces because they're so desperate to know the winner of The Worker for Best Feature Film. Our nominating committee, I think it's fair to say, chose genuinely great films this year. They're not just great labor movies, they are great movies. And let me also say, as Harold referenced earlier in the blogcast, last year's winner, Norma Rae, is on the list this year, nominated again. So I'm going to flip the script here, and I'm just going to ask our guest panelists to very quickly tell us not who they would pick in this category, but who they think our subscribers picked. Which film they think our subscribers picked to be Best Feature Film. Jennifer, who's going to take home The Worker for Best Feature Film?
Well, again, I think it's a matter of actor personality, and I think that it will be either Norma Rae or Silkwood, simply because of the powerful performances by the actresses who played the leading characters. That would be my guess.
Okay, Harold, who do you think our subscribers picked to be which film do you think the subscribers picked to be the best feature film?
Maybe it's recency bias, as you mentioned before, but Sorry to Bother You is gonna bring the sizzle. I'm making a prediction now.
Wow, good for you. I gotta say, I watched it for the first time this year and loved it. I absolutely loved it. Tammy, who do you think? I'm sorry, go ahead, Harold.
No, I was just gonna say it's so great. It's really just so great.
Absolutely, everybody. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. You're going to really, I promise you will enjoy it.
I say so
Tammy,
too. It is a great film. It's
yeah.
absolutely great.
Tammy, which film do you think our subscribers picked to be the 2025 recipient of the Worker for Best Feature Film?
It probably is Sorry to Bother You, although the film Salt of the Earth has so much backstory that we have to remember that that was completely silenced, censored, and ripped apart physically. And it was only because they could find some of the takes that were in different, bins. So we have to remember the labor film and the attack on that film, and the fact that the filmmakers were then blacklisted. So part of the reason why I wish that film was selected is because of the fact of where it sits in our history, especially history of working class struggles and the history of film. But you got my vote.
Salt of the Earth.
Sorry to bother
Okay.
you.
No, sorry to bother you. I'm sorry.
No,
But I want to agree with you on Salt of the Earth. I urge everyone to find it. It was not easy to find, but it's well worth watching. It's not even a time capsule. It just is if you want to see real human beings, not that actors aren't real human beings, Harold, but real people who are not professional actors acting their lives, it's immensely potent. It's immensely potent. Okay. The 2025 Worker for Best Feature Film goes to, I sealed this envelope for some reason. I have no idea why. I made it a lot harder.
It's
Best Feature
important.
Film. It is very important. I guess I said no accountants involved in this process at all. The Best Feature Film of 2025, The Worker goes to Matewan from 1987, written and directed by John Sayles. Matewan won by a very large margin. It got 44% of the vote. Coming in second was Salt of the Earth with 22% of the vote. And Norma Ray and Silkwood each got 13% of the vote. Boy, oh boy, that was really surprising. That was not what I expected to have happen. So Matewan is the winner of the Best Feature Film. What a terrific conversation with Jennifer Marin, Harold Phillips, Tammy Gold. I thought we were not going to have any musical numbers, but Jennifer did one earlier, so we even had a production number here on the Labor Oscars 2025. Thank you all for participating. Thank you, audience, for being with us. Thank you for your votes. Thank you for participating in the process. Thank you for going to see worker power films and supporting the artists who make them.
And do go look at that Letterboxd link, because it's hard to find these things, but they've done an amazing job of pulling together all those sources. It's really worthwhile.
Yes, and thank you very much for continuing to do this. It is just very important, and I think the results actually show the commitment of your audience to film about labor, and that they are very thinking audience, which is very impressive.
Thank you very much. I like to think they're a thinking audience. That's why they found their way to Power at Work. Thanks very much, everybody. We will see you back on Power at Work again very soon.
Public professionals, would you like to learn how data, digital innovation, and AI skills can improve your work and help you serve your constituents better? The answer is Innovate US. Innovate US offers no-cost learning on the skills you need to succeed in government in the 21st century. Attend a 1-hour weekly workshop or enroll in a course on AI or human-centered design at your own pace. It's all free to you. Visit innovate-us.org today to learn more and sign up. That's Innovate-US. Visit right now.